Just to give you an update on what the situation is, we have been increasing the size of our search area on the ground. Currently we have 2 FWC dog teams out here. We have the Collier County Sheriff's Office helicopter with infrared technology on it, but because of the heat, it hasn't been as effective as we'd like it to be. Because we're increasing the size of the area, we have 2 Collier County emergency response teams, which will give us an additional 12 people on the ground.
Hello, friends. In this episode, we take a look at the history, legends, and disappearances in Everglades National Park. Now, Everglades National Park is located just outside Miami, Florida, and is home to the largest subtropical wilderness in the United States. The park covers about 1.5 million acres of land and hosts one of the most diverse ecosystems currently found nowhere else in the world. It's home to an abundance of wildlife, including rare and endangered species like manatees, the American alligator, and the elusive Florida panther. The scenery is striking, with thousands of miles of sawgrass, intermittent cypress domes, and countless water sloughs. The park offers a variety of outdoor activities, including hiking, camping, boating, fishing, wildlife viewing and photography, guided tours of the area, and even gambling in the Native American casinos. The Everglades tropical climate means there are 2 primary seasons, wet and dry. Between December and April, the dry season provides low humidity and mild temperatures that range from the low 50s to the high 70s in Fahrenheit. The dry season is the peak for tourism when water levels are low and the wildlife congregate in central water locations. The wet season, from May to December, however, brings about harsher conditions. Temperatures can reach the high 90s with high humidity and near constant rain. This makes for a dangerous environment for those who go unprepared. To many people, the Everglades are a reminder of the beauty and wonder of nature. But there's a sinister side to these wondrous marshes. We're going to look at the history of the Everglades, as well as local legends, mysteries, strange disappearances, and one survivor's account. A little bit of history first. Humans inhabited the Everglades area as early as 15,000 years ago, well before South Florida turned into the present wetlands. They would have found an arid landscape that supported plants and animals adapted for desert conditions. However, 6,500 years ago, climate changes brought a wetter landscape. Large animals became extinct in Florida, and the Paleo-Indians slowly adapted and became the archaic peoples. They conformed to the environmental changes and created many tools with the various resources available. Florida Native Americans developed into 3 distinct but similar cultures that were named for the bodies of water near where they were located: Okeechobee, Caloosahatchee, and Glades. From the Glades people, 2 major nations emerged in the area, the Calusa and the Tequesta. With Spanish colonization, both tribes gradually declined during the next 2 centuries. Then, the Seminole tribe, mostly formed of Creek people who had been warring to the north, assimilated other peoples and created an entirely new culture after being forced from northern Florida into the Everglades region during the Seminole Wars of the early 19th century. After adapting to the region, the Seminole people were able to resist removal by the United States Army. The Seminole called the area Pahokee, meaning grassy water. They learned to survive in marshy wetlands by hunting the local game, fishing the waters, and eventually cultivating select crops. In 1897, Andrew Jackson invaded Florida to hasten its annexation to the United States in what became known as the First Seminole War. After Florida became a U.S. territory in 1821, conflicts between the settlers and the Seminoles increased. The Second Seminole War lasted from 1835 to 1842, and afterward, the U.S. forcibly removed about 3,000 Seminole and 800 Black Seminole to Indian Territory, which is now Oklahoma, west of the Mississippi River. Many others died in the war. Conflict broke out again in the Third Seminole War from 1855 to 1859, when a few hundred Seminole fought off U.S. forces from the swamps of the Everglades. The U.S. finally decided to leave them alone after failing to dislodge them. By 1913, the Seminole people left in the Everglades numbered no more than 325. The construction of the Tamiami Trail, beginning in 1928 and spanning the region from Tampa to Miami, altered their ways of life. Some began to work in local farms, ranches, and souvenir stands. Some of the people who interacted more with European Americans began to move to reservations in the 1940s. These were their basis for reorganizing their government, and they became federally recognized in 1957 as the Seminole Tribe of Florida. People who kept more traditional ways had settlements along the Tamiami Trail and usually spoke the Miccosukee language. They were federally recognized in 1962 as the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida. As metropolitan areas in South Florida began to grow, the two groups were closely associated with the Everglades. They struggled to maintain privacy while serving as tourist attractions. They earned money by such diverse ways as wrestling alligators and selling handmade crafts. As of 2008, the Seminole Tribe of Florida had 5 reservations, and the lands of the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians were collectively considered a 6th reservation. The two tribes have each developed casino gaming on some of their properties to generate revenue for support, services, and economic development. The idea of a national park for the Everglades was first pitched in 1928 when a Miami land developer named Ernest F. Coe established the Everglades Tropical National Park Association. It had enough support to be declared a national park by Congress in 1934. It took another 13 years for it to become a dedicated national park, which happened on December 6, 1947. In 1948, Congress approved the Central and Southern Florida Project for flood control and other purposes, which divided the Everglades into basins. In the northern Everglades were water conservation areas and the Everglades agricultural area bordering to the south of Lake Okeechobee. In the southern Everglades was Everglades National Park. Levees and pumping stations released water in drier times or removed it and pumped it out to the ocean during times of flooding. The water conservation areas took up approximately 37% of the original Everglades. During the 1950s and 1960s, the Miami metropolitan area grew 4 times as fast as the rest of the nation. Between 1940 and 1965, 6 million people moved to South Florida, with 1,000 people moving to Miami every week. This population and economic boom wasn't without consequence, however. With the production of more agriculture came an ever-changing Everglades environment. Specifically, the production of sugarcane nearly destroyed the water quality due to phosphorus runoff. In 2008, the state of Florida agreed to buy U.S. sugar and all of its manufacturing and production facilities for an estimated $1.7 billion. Florida officials intended to allow U.S. sugar to process for 6 more years before dismissing its employees and dismantling the plant. This area, which includes 187,000 acres of land, would then be rehabilitated and water flow from Lake Okeechobee would be restored. In November 2008, the agreement was revised to offer $1.34 billion, allowing sugar mills in Clewiston to remain in production. Further research is being done to address the problem of the runoff. Everglades Restoration received $96 million of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. As a result, a mile-long bridge to replace the Tamiami Trail, a road that borders Everglades National Park to the north and has blocked water from reaching the southern Everglades, was begun by the Army Corps of Engineers in December 2009. Governor Charlie Crist announced around that time that $50 million of state funds would be designated for Everglades restoration. In May 2010, 5.5 miles of bridges were proposed to be added to the Tamiami Trail. These protection measures have been imperative to the survival of the Everglades and the people who live in the area. Today, most of South Florida relies on the Everglades for their drinking water. Multiple agencies are still working towards complete restoration of the Everglades, and the national park is an important part of our country and its history, and we should continue to do all we can to protect it. Now, let's look at some of the legends and mysteries in the Everglades. Probably the most well-known and most discussed is a creature known as the skunk ape. While many people don't even believe in its existence, tales and reports of this cryptid called the skunk ape, also known as the swamp ape or Florida's Bigfoot, have been around for centuries. This ape-like creature is said to inhabit the swamps of the southeastern United States, most notably Florida. The skunk ape is generally described as being a bipedal ape-like creature standing 5 to 7 feet tall and covered in blotchy reddish-brown hair. The skunk ape has been part of Florida, Georgia, and Alabama's folklore since the European settler period at least. Even the Seminole culture going far back includes stories that have been passed down about a foul-smelling, powerful, and secretive creature they call Esti Kapkaki, which roughly translates to cannibal giant. There have been over 333 sightings in Florida, archived by the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, or the BFRO, as well as 137 from Georgia and 100 from Alabama. Most of these reported sightings range from the 1960s all the way to today's time, though legends of the ape-like creature's existence have been around much longer. Reports of the skunk ape were cataloged in newspapers as early as 1818 in a report from what is now known as Apalachicola, Florida, which spoke of a man-sized monkey raiding food stores and even stalking fishermen along the shore. In 1942, there was a man in Suwannee County, Florida, who reported a similar creature had rushed out from the brush line while he was driving down an isolated road. The creature allegedly grabbed his vehicle and began beating on his door and running board, continuing the assault for half a mile before finally letting go and falling off and then running into the woods. During the 1970s, there were more than a dozen reported sightings of the skunk ape in Palm Beach County alone. Eyewitnesses claimed the creature was up to 8 feet tall and weighed 500 pounds or more, and that it could move rapidly when frightened or pursued. The most notable and agreed upon feature of the skunk ape is its smell, with a stench described as a cross between a skunk and aged roadkill. In June of 1974, a farmer named Buddy Sterrett reported that a skunk ape had picked up and attacked one of his dogs that weighed 110 pounds. Buddy is quoted as saying, "It had the smell that would make the hair on the back of your head stand up." Reports continued in the 1980s, including one from a college psychology professor who encountered an upright, ape-like animal reported as having, quote, non-human body language and movements, unquote. This was in Alachua County, Florida. And sightings have happened into our current years. In 2015, a video was taken by a kayaker named Matthew McCamey at the Lettuce Lake Park in Hillsborough County, Florida. The video shows a bipedal, ape-like creature wading through a cypress marsh. Reports like this still come in, though the creature has managed to elude capture or further study. Next up, let's have a look at the Lost Patrol. Flight 19, which has been mistakenly called the Lost Patrol, wasn't really a patrol at all, but a naval training flight. It was December 5, 1945, several months after the end of World War II. The weather was a warm 67 degrees with billowing clouds and a southwest wind. These were considered average conditions for training flights. This endeavor was supposed to be a routine navigation exercise as well as a mock bombing run. A squadron of 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, carrying a total of 14 men, were to fly to the Hen and Chicken Shoals in the Bahamas, where they would practice dropping their torpedoes and then return to the Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station. The flight was to be their last practice run before graduation, and these guys had done this before. The 5 bombers took off without incident and made their way to the Bahamas. Those aboard Flight 19 completed their exercise and were heading back to base. Then, about 90 minutes after takeoff, Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor reported that he was somehow lost and the weather and sea conditions were worsening. Over the next several hours, it is believed that Lieutenant Taylor mistakenly led Flight 19 further out to sea, and that the planes eventually ran out of fuel and crashed. A massive and extensive search and rescue effort was launched for the 5 lost planes, with units from the Navy, Army, and Coast Guard sent out to search for the lost aircraft. The disappearance of the 5 bombers sparked one of the largest air and sea searches in history. The last location given was 75 miles northeast of Cocoa, Florida. There was a little more than 1 hour's worth of fuel left. It's believed the group may have actually been as far as 200 miles out at sea. Weather and sea conditions were steadily worsening as the evening wore on, and what began as decent conditions for their training flight soon turned out to be dangerous for Flight 19. It was reported by the airport weather station in Miami that a large area of turbulence rolled out of a storm that was centered over Georgia, sweeping over Jacksonville, Florida around noon and reaching Miami by nightfall. There were squalls on the surface, 40-mile-per-hour winds at 1,000 feet, and a full hurricane reaching 75 miles an hour at 8,000 feet, all recorded at 4 p.m. There was a radio conversation between the flight leader Taylor and a fellow Navy pilot Lieutenant Robert F. Cox, a senior flight instructor, who was also in the air but not a part of the planes in Flight 19. This conversation was uncovered in the Board of Investigation records. The last transmission from Flight 19 took place at 7:04 p.m., when Lieutenant Cox was on air communicating with Flight 19 until their signal got weaker. Lieutenant Cox wanted to search for the squadron at that point, but was told not to by NASFL officials who feared losing another pilot. However, within minutes of learning of Flight 19's predicament, 2 PBM Mariner flying boats were dispatched from NAS Banana River in Melbourne, Florida, which is now Patrick Air Force Base. Both planes were carrying rescue equipment and planned to render aid to Flight 19. Less than an hour after takeoff, at approximately 7:27 p.m., one of the PBMs called Trainer 49 radioed back that they were nearing the last assumed position of Flight 19. There were 13 crew members on board Trainer 49. After that last radio call, the 13 men on Trainer 49 were never heard from again. The search for all these missing aircraft involved hundreds of ships and planes. The Navy ordered 248 planes into the air, 18 surface craft, including the baby flat-top USS Solomons, and numerous merchant ships. At that time, it was the biggest rescue effort to ever take place in times of peace. Search and rescue crews covered more than 200,000 square miles of the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico, while on land they combed Florida's interior. Searching virtually every mile of open water off the coast were 6 planes from the 3rd Air Force, 120 planes from the Navy Air Advanced Training Command, and several aircraft from the Air Transport Command. The Boca Raton Army Airfield, the Coast Guard, and the RAF in Nassau all participated. Additionally, dozens of Navy and Coast Guard surface craft joined in the search. The efforts were directed from the Coast Guard headquarters of the 7th Naval District in Miami. Many naval officers also participated in the massive search. Frank Daly from Alpharetta, Georgia, a Naval Reserve captain, flew in a PBY seaplane to look for the missing aircraft. He recalls that for 3 days, 6 hours a day, they plowed up and down the whole coast of Florida looking for wreckage, but never saw a thing. In loving memory of the Flight 19 crew, as well as PBM-5 Mariner's Rescue crew, we will now read the names of those we lost in this tragedy. From Flight 19, Ballock, B.E., Jr., Buzzy, J.T., Devlin, G.F., Gallivan, R.F., Gerber, F.J., Grubel, R.P., Lightfoot, W.E., Pelnessa, G.R., Parpart, W.R., Powers, E.J., Stivers, G.W., Taylor, Charles C., Squadron Leader, Thelander, A.H., and Thompson, H.O. From the NAS Banana River PBM-5 Mariner, Allen, Roger M., Arsenault, Charles D., Cameron, Robert C., Cargill, Wiley D., Cohn, Harry G., Eliason, Lloyd A., Jeffrey, Walter G., commanding pilot of PBM-5 Mariner, Jordan, James F., Menendez, John T., Neiman, Philip B., Osterheld, James F., Peterson, Donald E., Sawicki, Alfred J. May all these men rest in peace. We thank you for your service. The mystery and intrigue over what really happened has kept interest high in this case. The mystery of Flight 19 helped spread awareness of the legend of the Bermuda Triangle, which is the area between Fort Lauderdale, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, where dozens of airplanes and boats have disappeared over the years. How could an entire group of experienced airmen disappear without a shred of evidence? Then, how did one of the rescue planes, upon nearing Flight 19's last known location, also seemingly disappear into thin air? No trace of any of these planes was ever found. Some theorize strong electromagnetic currents in the Bermuda Triangle area may be to blame. Others think perhaps it was extraterrestrials. What do you think happened to Flight 19 and the rescue plane that disappeared? Next up, another strange tale from the Everglades. The story of the red-eyed ghost boy. The story of the red-eyed ghost boy in the Everglades dates back to the early 1800s. Although there is some discrepancy as to where the ghost boy originated, his most distinguishing feature are his glowing red eyes. One version of the ghost boy's origin states that he was a 10-year-old settler in the Native American territory who was cursed by one of the indigenous people because of how the settlers were wreaking havoc on the land and treating the natives. Another theory is that he was a kid who accidentally drowned while participating in a swimming race with one of his friends. Regardless of where the spirit came from, his glowing red eyes give him away whenever he's near. There have been many stories told over the years about encounters with this spirit. One story on YourGhostStories.com, written by a user whose name on the site is Jones Blue, tells of an encounter with a boy while canoeing in the Everglades with his mom, dad, sister, aunt, and cousin. It was a breezy, cold day, and user Jones Blue and their family got to the canoe rental place and waited a few minutes for their aunt and cousin to arrive. After getting things settled for the canoe rental, Jones Blue and their aunt and cousin took one canoe, while the mom, dad, and sister took another. They paddled for about 15 minutes, just enjoying the scenery and chatting. Jones Blue states then he looked down into the water and saw a human figure swimming beneath the group. The water was shallow, but the figure was moving like it had all the room in the world and seemed to be passing through everything in the water that should have halted it. Upon closer inspection, they could see that it was a young boy, possibly 13, 14 years old, with beautiful blonde hair. They gasped, and the boy looked up with dark red eyes and rings of black around them. Jones Blue says in their story that they sensed evil, sadness, and cruelty from the boy. After seeing he was noticed, the boy swam deeper into the water, fading away. The user's family was alerted by that point, and the mom began asking, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" Jones Blue replied, fibbing a little, Yeah, I'm just fine. I thought I saw something in the water and it scared me. It was nothing, though." Jones Blue's mom said, "Okay," and the family continued on. But not even 5 minutes had passed when something else happened. Jones Blue was looking all around, enjoying the scenery, when they saw the boy again. Focusing through the layers of thick mangrove trees, they could see the boy staring back with an angry face, but this time with completely full and bright red eyes. The storyteller thought the family needed to get out of there immediately. Their canoes went into an open area of the river, but Jones Blue was still focused on the boy. The wind picked up suddenly, and the air grew colder. The cousin was standing up at that moment, taking a video. The aunt barely had hold of her legs for support. As Jones Blue continued staring at the boy, the wind worsened. The canoe then tipped, causing the cousin to lose balance and fall overboard. After quickly looking away from the boy and to their cousin, Jones Blue stood and reached for the cousin who had fallen into the water. They looked back towards the boy, but he was gone. Jones Blue panicked and yelled, take my hand, get back on the boat." Cousin did so and swam quickly, reaching for their hand with both arms. Jones Blue quickly pulled her back onto the boat, and she seemed fine. Jones Blue states that he worried the rest of the time they were in the water. They spotted the boy again. He gave an evil wink and rolled his eyes back, then faded away. "Ouch, my back hurts all of a sudden," the cousin exclaimed. The user lifted her shirt up, and to everyone's surprise, her whole back was a big black and blue bruise, one that hadn't been there before, and shouldn't have been so far progressed if it had just happened. Everywhere they looked on her back had a bruise. "I don't even remember getting hurt," she said. "Who knows," Jones Blue said back, feigning indifference, but knowing internally that the boy had something to do with it. The family left after that. Jones Blue goes on to say that they went back a few years later and asked one of the workers there about the area's history and explained their experience. The worker told them that many years ago, a boy in his teens was playing around with his friends in the water. One of his friends placed a bet with him to see who could hold their breath the longest. The boy was from a poor family and wanted to win the money desperately. While competing for the prize, the boy accidentally drowned. They saw the boy again while leaving the Everglades Visitor Center, only this time they knew the boy's story and could sense sorrow from the entity. They felt the boy's spirit would always be there, stuck in the place of his bodily demise. Now, this is just one account of someone coming into contact with the infamous red-eyed ghost boy. Others are not so sure of the boy's harmless past. Some believe it is indeed the cursed spirit of a young boy. There have been recollections by locals of large masses of wildlife suddenly dying off after the ghost boy appears, like they were perhaps poisoned or came down with some mystery illness. Whatever the case, it's certain that encountering this spirit isn't a good sign, and one shouldn't taunt the boy if they find themselves in his territory. Next up, the legend of the owl witches. An old Seminole legend holds that there are owl witches, or stingini, who live among us. Owl witches are ominous beings that roam the swamplands at night looking for victims. They are sinister shapeshifters that appear as ordinary people during the day. At night, however, they transform into massive, great horned owls, standing 9 feet tall with huge feathers, and they're extremely vicious. They would prey on the Seminole tribe at night, so much so that it became common practice to warn their people not to go out alone after dark, especially kids. The owl witch's metamorphosis is said to occur by them vomiting their souls and internal organs each evening, basically turning themselves inside out so they can take on their true identity. They must hunt, and they prefer the hearts and flesh of whatever they come across, so they may continue to appear as human during the day. Although stingini translates to horned owl, they've been known to take on other forms, like a bear or wolf, sometimes even coyotes. Some Seminole groups warn that simply speaking their name aloud puts one at risk of turning into an owl witch, and as such, there are some groups where only revered tribal elders are even allowed to tell the stories of their existence. The Seminoles were unable to tell the difference between an owl witch and a real human because of the creature's ability to take on the human form so convincingly. There have been large stingini totems unearthed, showing how ingrained their existence is to the Seminole culture. Similar legends exist in various cultures around the world. The Cherokee have Spearfinger. In Mexican folklore, the lechuza is a large magical bird who seeks revenge on those that have wronged her. West Virginia, of course, has legends of the Mothman, a mysterious winged humanoid that's said to be an omen of impending doom. Ancient Greek mythology spoke of Striege, a wicked vampire-like screech owl that was forced to live in an upside-down world. All that said, probably best not to wander around alone at night should one happen to come across a stingini and be consumed by the creature, or any other predatory bird being said to exist throughout history. Perhaps the Seminoles had it right, and it's best not to speak of them aloud, just in case the swamp is listening. Now, let's take a look at some disappearances from the Everglades. Roger Sawyer. 67-year-old Roger Sawyer disappeared on March 5, 2011 from Everglades National Park. He had traveled from Oregon with his family on a cross-country trip in a motorhome. He was a retired butcher and very experienced in the outdoors. He and his family were staying in the park as the last part of their vacation. Roger was last seen at a remote campground in the Flamingo area of the park when some of his relatives left the campground to check out the visitor center. Roger, along with his wife Paula, stayed behind, though they were in different parts of the camp. He was wearing a green sleeveless t-shirt with the words "Got Milt" written on it, khaki shorts, Crocs, a black Hard Rock Cafe baseball cap, and a gold wedding band. The last time anyone saw Roger was around 6 p.m. on the beach that evening. By 8:30 p.m., everyone except Roger had returned to the motorhome, at which point his family alerted authorities of his disappearance. An extensive search and rescue effort was launched, but there was no indication of his whereabouts. Park officials, as well as Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, participated in the search, which continued for 10 days to no avail. Roger's family had to return home with no answers as to what had happened to him. Now, it's unclear whether Roger became lost or if there was some other reason for his disappearance. Nobody has seen or heard from Roger since that day. As of April 2022, Roger remains missing, and there have been no further updates. Next, we have Jacob Michael Olivier. 23-year-old Jacob Olivier disappeared on August 24, 2011, from Everglades National Park. Jacob lived in Texas and worked as a mechanic at a car shop, but had driven alone to Florida and was visiting the national park. His family was unaware that he was in Florida at the time of his disappearance. Jacob is described as a Caucasian male standing 5 foot 6 inches tall and weighing 130 pounds. He has black hair, green eyes, double-pierced ears, and his hair was styled in a mohawk when he went missing. He was driving a dark green 1998 Isuzu Hombre pickup truck with a Texas plate. On August 27, 2011, his vehicle was found by Everglades National Park rangers in a parking lot beside Pine Glades Lake in Homestead, Florida. They noticed the vehicle had been parked there for several days. Nobody knows where Jacob was or what he was doing for those 3 days. The receipt inside his truck indicated he got to the park on August 24th, and a surveillance video showed him driving alone at 1 p.m. that day. His cell phone last pinged off a tower at 4:45 p.m. No further evidence of his whereabouts was discovered. It wasn't like Jacob to go so long without being in contact with his family, and he had no friends or relatives in Florida. It's unclear as to why he was even in the area at the time of his disappearance. Now, there had been some drug problems in Jacob's past, but he had been through a rehab program, and there was no evidence of drugs or paraphernalia at the scene, so anything related to this is unlikely. There was a gun case, but no gun in the truck, which isn't uncommon in a place like the Everglades. There simply isn't a plausible explanation as to what happened to Jacob, however. Rangers searched the park for any sign of him, but nothing was found, and there were no reported sightings of him aside from the video surveillance when he entered the park. Police and park officials conducted grid searches and used canines, but there wasn't a trace of evidence outside of his abandoned truck. Helicopter searches also came up empty. Investigators thought that perhaps he left the park in another vehicle or maybe even on foot, but nothing conclusive ever surfaced. Jacob's mom, Laurie Broussard, said she got reports 2 weeks before he went missing that he was in Effingham County. She asked for the public's help, and Jacob's case was shared far and wide, but absolutely nothing more came to light. The search went on nearly 2 weeks, with multiple search methods at play and law enforcement from 45 different agencies, but officials found nothing the entire time. Jacob is classified as endangered missing, and anyone with any information on his whereabouts is asked to contact Everglades National Park Dispatch at 305-242-7740. As of this recording, Jacob Olivier remains missing, and there have been no further updates. Next, we have Kyle Andrew Carl Epler. 20-year-old Kyle Epler disappeared on July 29, 1999, from Monroe County in Florida. Kyle graduated from Lely High School in 1997 and was studying zoology at Santa Fe College at the time of his disappearance. He loved animals, had 5 pet lizards, 7 turtles, a parrot, and 2 dogs. He also volunteered for the Humane Society and Animal Control, and he had also worked at several snake farms. In addition, he enjoyed the outdoors and traveling. Kyle was last seen by his mother when he went to Germain Honda BMW, where she worked, and asked to borrow $20 for gas. Kyle said he was going to visit his girlfriend, then go to his 4:30 p.m. shift at the Grouper House, where he was a waiter. He also promised that he would drop off for dry cleaning. Kyle never arrived at his girlfriend's house, nor did he run the errand for his mother. He did leave a note on the kitchen counter saying, "Gone to find my river and myself." His mother reported missing the next day when he didn't return. Kyle is described as a Caucasian male, 5 foot 10 inches tall and 160 pounds. He was last seen wearing a short-sleeved brown shirt, brown shorts, and Birkenstocks at the time of his disappearance. He has brown hair and green eyes and a scar near his right eye. He also has 2 tattoos on his right shoulder. Kyle's silver 1988 Toyota Camry was found by authorities where it was abandoned in the visitors' parking area at the Coastal Ferry Trail in Flamingo, Florida, about 3 hours from his home. This is in the Everglades National Park in what is described as a wet, boggy, dangerous area. The park receipt in his Camry was dated July 28. Authorities also found camping gear, a bag full of clothes, a framed backpack, peanut butter, crackers, and some journals inside the vehicle. His shirt was found 3 miles down the trail from where his car was parked. Kyle's mother also stated that at least 1 pair of his hiking boots was missing from home, along with a navy blue hat with a white star on it that he frequently wore. Despite an extensive search, no other clues or evidence was found, and Kyle has not been heard from since that day. As of this recording, in April 2022, Kyle remains missing, and there have been no further updates. And finally, an amazing tale of survival from the Everglades. Mark Mealy. 67-year-old Mark Mealy was last seen before his incident on January 22, 2020, when he left for a solo kayaking trip in the Everglades National Park. Mike lives in Virginia with his family, but was visiting Florida for some outdoor recreation. He set out in his kayak on January 22nd, carrying his wallet, phone, and general supplies. He was supposed to return a week later, but his family never heard from him. The exact circumstances of his ordeal are unclear. but Mark somehow got separated from his kayak toward the end of his swampy excursion. Park rangers found Mark's bag containing his belongings, including his wallet and cell phone, several days later when it washed up on the bank of the Lopez River near the Monroe County line in the 10,000 Islands area of the park. Rangers alerted the Collier County Sheriff's Office of their findings. Staff at the Sheriff's Department were able to download data from Mark's phone, which showed the device's last known coordinates on January 31st, which was 9 days after his trip began. His belongings weren't found until Sunday, February 2nd, so Mark had already been gone for over 11 days. Authorities began a targeted air and water search of the area based on the last known coordinates, and shortly before noon on Monday, February 3rd, an aviation unit spotted Mark a few miles away from where his belongings were found. He was floating face up in the river and didn't appear to be moving. The aviation unit guided rescue boats to his location. From there, aviation pilot Ed Henderson of the Collier County Sheriff's Office flew in with a helicopter that spotted Mark in the water. Corporal Henderson told CNN affiliate WINK News their first concern when they found him, it didn't look like he was moving, and they didn't know if it was going to be a rescue or recovery. He had been in the water for 2 solid days at that point, and it had been really cold. Mark was dehydrated, hypothermic, and convulsing when the rescue crew got to him, but he was thankfully and amazingly alive. The rescue operation was captured on video by the Sheriff's Aviation Department. Mark was floating along a stretch of water that was about 18 to 24 inches deep. He was wearing a life jacket, which most likely did indeed save his life. Park rangers pulled Mark into their skiff and brought him to shore. He couldn't even have a conversation when he was first rescued because he was in such bad shape. When he first set out on the rescue mission, Corporal Henderson said he had his doubts that Mark would be found alive. It's really a feeling of elation when you're able to find somebody alive knowing the circumstances that they were in, he said. Everything happens for a reason, and we were fortunate that we found him. We were certainly fortunate that we found him alive. It was hard work by everybody. Mark was taken to Physicians Regional Hospital and treated by medical staff for hypothermia and various problems stemming from exposure to the elements. Nevertheless, his life was saved, and he is expected to make a full recovery. Mark's family was extremely grateful to have him back safe and alive, and they thanked his rescuers in a statement released by the Sheriff's Office on their behalf. We couldn't have worked with a more wonderful, caring, kind, and straightforward group of people, the family said in the statement. It's a miracle he's alive and in the condition he's in. We would also like to thank the professionals at Physicians Regional Hospital for their competency and caring ways. Michelle Batten, a spokesman for the Sheriff's Office, said that deputies hadn't been able to interview Mark to learn how he got separated from his kayak. She didn't know if it had been recovered or any further details of the incident. While the circumstances surrounding Mark's incident remain unclear, fortunately he was found alive and in full recovery, and that's what matters. Things like this continue to happen daily in the Everglades. In fact, all of our national parks are hotspots for all manner of strange occurrences. While there could be any number of causes to blame for these instances, one thing is certain: we can never be sure something won't happen to us. We recommend that everyone who plans on being within our national parks or out in the wilderness in general carry a personal locator beacon at all times. When triggered, it'll transmit a distress signal with its location. What do you think is happening in the Everglades? Let us know in the comments section, but please keep it friendly and respectful. And if we've earned your subscription, hit that button and turn on the post notifications so you won't miss any new content or case updates. Meanwhile, be good to yourselves and each other. Stay safe out there. As for me, I'll see you a little farther on down the trail. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'll talk to you next time.